It might surprise you to learn that California was the first state in the Union to pass a law requiring repeat child sex offenders to be either physically or chemically castrated as a prerequisite to being granted parole. It might surprise you also to learn that one, the law remains on the books and in force, and two, despite the fact it's been on the books and in force for over 25 years, the penalty has been meted out in precious few instances. You see, when we first passed the law, it was in a public referendum in 1996. It didn't contain any exceptions or any caveats in its original version. If you were convicted of a child sex predation and you were granted parole, it would be without a functioning set of testicles. You can choose the hormones or you can choose the scalpel. Take your damn pick. That law, and other laws like it, arose mainly out of the murder of Polly Klaas in Petaluma in 1993. Her killer had 20-plus felonies on his record, including multiple child sex crimes, but he was out on the street anyway. So in the next election, the next year, in 94, we passed what I think was the nation's first three strikes law, meaning 3 felonies, and you're done. Automatic life sentence, throw away the key, that's all she wrote. But the law had a blind spot in it, because you could be a multiple times convicted child molester and let's say you pled down one of the charges to a misdemeanor. Then there was the potential that you could still get out on parole even in spite of the 3 strikes law. So we came back in 96 and voted another law onto the books, saying irrespective of what child sex crime you got convicted of, even if it was just harassment or indecent exposure or what have you, if it's anything but a first offense, then say goodbye to your huevos if you ever want to walk the streets again, compadre. But the California Supreme Court, as the California Supreme Court often does, wasted little time blasting holes in both of those laws. First, they ruled the 3 strikes law unconstitutional for taking too much discretion away from the sentencing judge. So the mandatory 25 to life sentence stopped being mandatory and changed to being something the judge could impose only if he or she chose to impose it. And then they struck down the castration law for being too arbitrary, so we had to replace it with a different version that is much less awesome, which is the version that remains on the books today, which imposes the castration penalty only if it is your 3rd child sex felony, if the victim was under 13 years of age, and the crime happened while you were on parole for the 2nd offense. And no, regrettably, I am not making up any of that. There are 8 other states that impose chemical and or surgical castration as a condition of parole for child sex offenders, and they all arose during that same period in the second half of the 1990s. And when they were first being enacted, there really was not very much organized opposition to it, since this was back during a much simpler time when there was no dividend politically in being soft on violent criminals. And when activists actually used to stop and think, wait, do I really want to take a position that puts me on the same side as the serial kitty diddler? Because I don't think I do. But those days are well and truly gone now. For the ACLU has been waging a campaign for some years now to have every one of these castration laws in every state where they exist struck down on Fourth Amendment grounds as cruel and unusual punishment, which is to say, the leftists, and I think it's more than safe to call the ACLU an openly, nakedly leftist organization at this point, they think it's cruel and unusual that a serial child sex offender should be chemically castrated. But if you want to do the same goddamn thing to a 10-year-old boy, well, of course that's perfectly okay. That is gender-affirming health care, don't you know? Just 1 or 2 easy office visits will write you up a prescription and we will start shriveling those little testes right up. Your son will transform into your daughter practically overnight, and then, Mom and Dad, you will have a trans kid. And you don't need me to tell you that a trans kid is the summer's hottest fashion accessory. Everybody is getting one. It's like the 2022 version of a little dog that lives in your handbag. And ladies and gentlemen, I want you to take just a moment to appreciate that contrast. Try to imagine having had your intellect warped so completely by the mind virus of woke politics that you're totally fine doing something to a little kid that you think is heinously immoral to do to an adult serial rapist. As always, if there are any leftists here who want to explain how you reconcile the one with the other, I am all ears. Just please help me understand how in the motherfucking fuck of a fuck that all makes sense in your mind. From From high atop the battlements of Castle Curmudgeon, where we feed sex offenders to the alligators in the moat just like good civilized people. Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. America, and all ships at sea. Welcome to the program. I am your eponymous host and humble servant. And you may have noticed something slightly off-kilter in American politics last week. You may have found yourself thinking, wait, how did I wake up in a world where Nancy Pelosi is being cheerleaded by the Republicans and derided by the Democrats? Now, let's just answer the big questions right at the outset. Is it a good and proper thing that the Speaker of the House should visit Taiwan? Yes, it absolutely is. Should she make the trip irrespective of how much crying and saber-rattling there is from the ChiComs? Yes, she absolutely should. The more they cry and the more they saber-rattle, the more important it is that she go. Our relations with our democratic allies in South Asia, they are ours to conduct. And they are not subject to the whims of whiny asshole communists. I did a whole video recently about the China situation, and it's impossible to cover everything that one would like to cover in a mere 3,500 words in 20 minutes. But one of the things I didn't have space for in that episode was a discussion of why, as a practical matter, the ChiComs are so desirous of conquering Taiwan. And yeah, if you ask 10 people why China wants Taiwan, probably all 10 will say because they view the conquest of Taiwan as the final chapter of the Chinese Civil War that the rest of the world views as having ended in 1949. And to some extent, of course, that is true. The communists have gotten fantastic propaganda value out of treating the Taiwan situation as being unresolved. It gives your people something toward which to strive. It gives them an historical grievance to redress. If you do it right, it can be a thing that unifies your people for decades or generations, which is to say, the ChiComs have used Taiwan to much better domestic political effect than a succession of Argentinian regimes did with the Falklands. And in many ways, they are identical situations. The mistake they made in Argentina was actually trying the invasion and getting their ass kicked. And don't think the ChiComs haven't been paying attention and taking notes, because they totally have. And they know they can't move on Taiwan unless they are guaranteed a very quick and relatively bloodless victory. Otherwise, they will wind up humiliated on the world stage. Their honor damaged, because how does it look for an aspiring superpower if they can't immediately subdue this little tiny island that they consider a contiguous portion of their own territory? But why else does communist China want Taiwan so badly? Well, it's because of what Taiwan is. Because of what Taiwan has become since 1949, which is the envy of the world in a lot of ways. There's a common trope about Chinese people, I guess you can call it a stereotype, that says research and development and design and engineering are not among the stronger components of the Chinese character. That the Chinese, both historically and up to the present day, have always preferred to take innovations from other cultures rather than doing the innovating themselves. But is that actually a characteristic of the Chinese people, or is it a function of the autocratic regimes that mainland China has historically lived under for nearly all of its history? Because the history of the Taiwanese people since the second half of the 20th century would seem to give lie to that stereotype. Taiwan has a technology sector that is the envy of most countries in the world. In Asia, they only trail Japan. They're probably on an equal footing with South Korea. And that is without the benefit of any alliances, without the benefit of any trade deals, and without even any diplomatic recognition from the world community at large. And Chinese people did all of that. All it took was a bit of freedom and a bit of liberal democracy. To the extent that mainland China has a technology sector, a pharmaceutical sector, a space flight sector, they have all that because we gave it to them. Sometimes wittingly, much more often unwittingly. But Taiwan has all of that on its own, with only 23.5 million people compared to the 1-point-whatever billion the ChiComs have got. And the ChiComs do not like that status quo, not one little bit. Not only because it's a reminder right on their front doorstep that democratic self-government will always be superior to Marxist tyranny, but also because they would absolutely love to get their hands on everything the Taiwanese have got. There will eventually come a time, and let's all hope it's sooner than later, when the U.S. government will get serious about cracking down on Chinese espionage and intellectual property theft. Trump did start to get serious about it, but I wish he had done a hell of a lot more than he did, and I would hope a Republican Congress, in the best case scenario, if they come away from the midterm with a veto-proof majority, that they'll waste no time in correcting the grievous error of 30 years ago and stripping China's most favored nation trade status. We cannot have this many economic entanglements with our hostile communist adversary, because it is stark raving madness that our leaders have allowed the current situation to exist. Is any American really comfortable living in a world where we rely on communist China for 90% of our antibiotic supply? Do I even need to spell out what the worst case scenario is there? Is any American really comfortable with the Chinese Communist Party shell companies buying up thousands upon thousands of acres of land right next to our military bases? Do you think China would ever let us get away with some shit like that? Of course they wouldn't, because China's leaders are serious people and not idiots. But our leaders can make no similar claim. And I hate to abruptly switch topics, ladies and gentlemen, without even a proper comedy segue, but a rather joyous bit of news has just flashed across the curmudgeon wire. Ayman al-Zawahri, the Egyptian doctor who co-founded Al-Qaeda and has been its nominal leader since Osama bin Laden got his skull ventilated by SEAL Team 6 11 years ago. Well, he is now also well and truly fucking dead, and it couldn't have happened to a nicer scumbag piece of shit, I don't think. And I would like to be able to say he died looking down the barrel of an American gun, but it turns out we droned him, which is fine. I'll take the kill, but I will admit to being a little bit weirded out that it was a CIA operation, because isn't the CIA supposed to be tasked with foreign intelligence gathering? Honestly, I had no idea that droning motherfuckers was part of the CIA's remit. And I don't think I'm all that cool with it, but that doesn't make me any less happy that this asshole is dead. So I guess we can look forward to a headline in tomorrow's Washington Post that says, Ayman al-Zawahri, austere physician and religious scholar, passes away at age, however the fuck old he was, 20 damn years older than he ever should have been. Let's just put it that way. And I understand the president, such as he is addressing the nation like simultaneously to the time I'm recording this, so I'm sure there will be plenty to unpack from that on Wednesday, as there is, of course, every time that Joe Biden makes vocal noises into an open microphone. This will be an interesting one, though. When you kill the world's most notorious terrorist, that's the one time a president has an excuse to pat himself on the back. And let's call things what they are. Joe Biden's been the president for over a year and a half now, and this is the first thing he can claim to have done right. It's going to be such a strange feeling for him, I think. I'm curious to see how he handles it. I guess maybe it's a blessing in disguise that it was a CIA operation and not the military, because, Christ, then we would have Milley and Austin crowing about, see? This is all down to our diversity and inclusion and our vaccine mandates and our unconscious bias seminars and our on-base drag queen shows. Only a fully woke military could have carried out this operation so effectively, and we are pleased to announce that rainbow feather boas are now a required part of the uniform for all services, effective immediately. And I bet Nancy Pelosi's pissed off right now. She just got knocked off the top of the headlines while she was just innocently sitting on the airplane. Don't worry though, Nance. Because if the ChiComs follow through on their threat to do an Admiral Yamamoto on your ass, I guarantee that you will knock the corpse of Dr. al-Zawahri off the top headline just like he did to you. And that's all that really matters, right? And you will be the first Speaker of the House to perish in combat. They will sing songs and raise statues in your honor. And there's one thing we still need to talk about with respect to this trip of hers, where it appears she will in fact land in Taiwan. Because there should have been no opportunity for a shoot-down threat here, frankly. The ChiComs never should have known anything about this visit until they were watching her plane touch down on the television. And then she stays for an hour or so and the plane is back in the air before the ChiComs ever have a chance to draft an angry press release about it. Whoever was responsible for disclosing to the press that this trip was happening, that person did a pretty hideously reckless and irresponsible thing. That person, I would submit, jeopardized the security of the number 3 official in the U.S. government. They did it needlessly, and they probably should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, because that's not okay. I would hate to think it was someone in the White House who did that, but I don't think I have a better theory at this point. Ever since that leak, everybody at the White House has been fairly adamant that they do not think it is a good idea for her to go on this trip, so it stands to reason that one of them leaked it as a means of pressuring her into canceling it, because obviously the ChiComs are going to start making big blustery threats and rattling their sabers, because that's what the ChiComs do. That is who the ChiComs are. It's one of the central features of communism, in fact. A state-run media agency where the people are expected to make utter fools of themselves with their slavish defenses of whatever today's regime policy happens to be. And we have a similar thing in this country. It's called CNN. But in all seriousness, no caveats, no qualifiers, credit to Nancy Pelosi for having the courage to go through with the trip. Anytime we are showing Taiwan that we have their back, I am in favor of it. We are America. We stand for freedom and democracy. We stand against the evil of communist tyranny. When an American president shakes the hand of one of our war allies and says, we will guarantee your security against foreign aggression, I don't care if it happened nearly 75 years ago. I say we damn well need to live up to that handshake and that guarantee, or else we are not worthy of the mighty legacy that our forefathers have handed down to us. And if the person who is going over there to stand up for that principle is the Democrat Speaker of the House, fine, that's great. Although, like I said earlier, it is pretty weird that the pro-Pelosi sentiment seems to be all coming from the Republican side. I think Tom Cotton, and he might not have been the only one, even volunteered to make the trip with her. And that is a real show of commitment right there. Not so much because the plane might get shot down, but because even in the best case scenario, you are sitting in an enclosed space with Nancy Pelosi for 13 hours. Now, the thing that really blows me away is how many people in official Washington and the fake news media think we have some moral obligation to fight a proxy war with Russia over Ukraine, a people whom we owe nothing, to whom we never made any guarantees of anything. But we should just stand around with our thumbs up our asses while the ChiComs overrun Taiwan? And have I really just closed an episode by heaping unvarnished, non-ironic praise on Nancy Pelosi? I have such a strange feeling right now. It feels a bit like the first time I went to Tijuana, but without the donkey. I guess I better just stopping before I say something really crazy like, I would love to see Whoopi Goldberg without her clothes on. God, Christ, you see what I mean? Thank you very much for watching. Have a pleasant tomorrow. See you Wednesday. Do not comply. Get off my lawn.